Hello, I'm Geraldine and these are my novel opinions. This is going to be a roundup of everything that I read in April. Rather belated, I'm afraid, because I came down with a cold and I just wasn't in the mood. So anyway, let's get on with it. The first book I read was Paradiso 17 by Hannah Lillith Assadi. Now this is the story of a man who, as a boy, lost his home. He was pushed out of his home along with his family. And it's really the story of how he spends the rest of his life trying to find somewhere where he feels at home again. Now it's beautifully written. You really get brought right into his world and you understand how he's feeling, and it is quite tragic. However, I did find myself losing quite a lot of sympathy with him as the book went on. Although, I mean, I might be being a little bit uncharitable here, but I know that grief and trauma can affect different people in different ways. However, I think something that happened when he was 5, however bad, is a little bit of a poor excuse for his increasingly bad behaviour. And he had ample opportunity. He had a loving family. He had a wife and a daughter who loved him. And he had ample opportunity to attempt to turn his life around rather than dragging down those around him. So I might be being a little bit unfair. Perhaps this is the point that the author was trying to make, that it can affect people in different ways. However, I didn't find myself going along with him emotionally. So very well written. But ultimately I wasn't entirely satisfied with the book. The next book I read was A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing by Alice Evelyn Yang. Now this is a family saga with a good dollop of magical realism thrown in. We start more or less in the present day. We are following a young woman whose father turns up, having abandoned the family about 11 years beforehand. And he's in a terrible state, and she's not sure whether it's alcoholism or dementia or a combination of the two. But he's muttering something about a prophecy, and then he forgets and he can't really remember what this prophecy is. And from there we go back in time to see the history of the family, how they lived in Japan-occupied Manchuria, and then along comes the Cultural Revolution and how all that has led up to the present day and all about this prophecy. The mythology and magical elements bleed right through into the modern day, but are these demons actually supernatural, or are they ones that we just pass on to our children through our behaviour and our example? This taught me a lot about the Cultural Revolution. I mean, I've read Wild Swans and The Good Earth, but there's always more to learn. What I didn't know, it kept on mentioning red children and black children. I thought, I don't think black children can mean what I think it does. So I looked it up, and it was how during the Cultural Revolution, the Communist Party did enlist children to turn on each other and onto adults as well. And the red children were good working class communist children, and the black children were blacklisted children of parents who had white collar or academic jobs, things like that. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. It had loads there, history and magic. I have mixed feelings about magical realism. I like it when it's full on. So something like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell or Babel, where we're living in a world exactly like our own, except where there is just magic and everyone knows there's magic. There are some other books that use it just when it's a little bit convenient for the plot. I'm not going to mention anything, but I think that can be a little bit lazy. This is somewhere in between, but I think it worked just right. the protagonist, when she encounters a demon or a witch, she's quite startled and she can't tell anyone because she thinks everyone will think she's mad. So obviously it's not a world where everyone accepts that there's magic, but it is there in some form, whatever that is. Anyway, I'd highly recommend this. I really enjoyed it. Then I moved on to The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson. This is a beautifully written tale about a Windrush era family, and we follow the story as it's told by one of the children in the family. And it actually starts off while she's still in the womb, and she's very happy because her entire world is just her and Mummy, and she loves Mummy. But then she's born and she doesn't really want the outside world to encroach, but it does. But she still loves Mummy. Mummy is her entire world, despite the fact that she's got siblings and a father. But gradually, as realities force themselves on her, she begins to realise that Mummy isn't quite as perfect as she originally thought. I love this story about a little girl finding her way in a big scary world, and it is quite scary, her world. But she is a bit of a child genius, and I'm getting a little bit fed up with so many stories about child geniuses. It's another form of privilege. It might not be money or wealth or status or class, but it is another privilege, and I want to see someone who doesn't have the advantage of a superb brain pulling themselves out of terrible working class conditions. Just for once, it might be nice. But otherwise, it was a lovely little story, and I did enjoy it enormously. The next book I read was The Benefactors by Wendy Erskine. This is a multi-layered novel about class and privilege, or lack of privilege, family love and betrayal. The central plot revolves around the sexual assault of a young woman from a blended family by three young men from rather more privileged families, and how the mothers of the three boys band together to, first of all, kind of explain away their son's behaviour, but also how to work out how to make the problem go away. The victim is naturally traumatised by events, but she's not at all sure about what she wants to do about it. And there are plenty of people around her who are only too happy to tell her what she should do. This book doesn't have a neat little ending because life doesn't work like that, so don't read it expecting one. But do read it and ask yourself how you would behave if you were in the position of various of the different characters, because you might surprise yourself. Some people have criticised this because it's told through the voices of many characters, and sometimes it's difficult to know who's speaking. I would agree with that, but I don't think it necessarily spoils it. If you keep going, it'll all come together and you don't necessarily need to know who's speaking absolutely all of the time. So yes, it's a nice little book, this one. Then I moved on to Moderation by Elaine Castillo. This is the story of a woman who works as a moderator for a social media company, and she's asked to move to a different post where she's working as a moderator on the company's new VR game. It's a much cushier job, and it pays an awful lot better. There's some very good writing in the book, which starts to bring out some important themes, but unfortunately they're never really brought out very well, and it ends up in a little bit of a mishmash and ultimately turns into a romance novel. I always say that I'll read anything except fantasy and romance. Not that I've got anything against those particular genres, so apologies to anyone who does like them. They're just not for me. But I could see the romance storyline coming a mile off in this book, and it hit every cliche along the way exactly as expected. So it didn't even surprise me from that point of view. Sadly, all the messages around grief and trauma, the tech business, corporate crime, race and culture get completely lost in this. So it's not really worth reading from that point of view. But if you're looking for a romance against a slightly different backdrop, then maybe give it a go. It might be for you. There was one bit that I quite enjoyed from a personal point of view. It's the book set in America, and the author's American as well. And this part, I'll just read it out to you. It's one of the main characters is introducing himself to the protagonist, and he says, "We moved to London quite soon after my birth, so I have no memories of Hong Kong. We lived mainly in Bromley. You won't have heard of it, though David Bowie grew up there." Now that's where I'm from, Bromley. At least it's not where I'm from, but it's where I've lived for many years. So it was quite nice to see little old Bromley popping up in an American novel. So yes, so that was quite nice, and I did squeal a little bit to myself when I read that. Finally, I read The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is an epistolary novel about a woman who is growing old and a little bit frail, and she likes corresponding with people through letters. Through these letters, we gradually learn about her life and her past, and how one particular traumatic event has affected not only the rest of her life, but also the lives of those around her, even some people not particularly close to her. She often struggles with social niceties, which sometimes makes it difficult for people to get along with her. However, through the letters she writes and receives, by the end of the novel, she does learn something about herself. People have been raving about this book, and I did enjoy it. It was a nice book, but I wasn't completely wowed by it like other people have been. Of course, this book made the shortlist of the Women's Prize for Fiction, and that brings us on to what I wanted to discuss next. I realise there are more important things going on in the world at the moment, but I was sorely disappointed in the shortlist this year. It didn't have any of my top 3 books that I've read from the long list. Haven't quite finished the long list, but I've done most of them. For a start, my absolute favourite was Gloria Don't Speak. I was really hoping that would make the shortlist, if not win. And I know that Ray from Ray Loves to Read will agree with me there. My other top 2 books would be A Guardian and a Thief and Audition. Of course, my top 3 books change daily, if not hourly, but those are currently my top 3 books. Gloria Don't Speak doesn't change. It's been up at the top since I read it. But I do wonder what they were looking for this year, what the panel were looking for. I realise that readability is an important factor, but I don't think I've come across much that wasn't very readable on this list. So I'm not sure whether that would have necessarily influenced them. Anyway, I won't grumble about that anymore because there's nothing I can do about it. I'm currently reading Flashlight. I'm going very slowly, partly because I had this cold and I can't read when I've got a cold. My head's too full of cotton wool. But also, as other people have found, it is quite dense, and it's fairly long as well. So I've been at it for over a week now, and I'm only about halfway through. But I will keep plugging away at it because despite its density, I am enjoying the storyline. Anyway, I hope you are enjoying whatever you're reading at the moment, and I will be back at the beginning of June with my May wrap up. See you then. Bye.